That's not to say that Nicolas Maduro is innocent by any stretch. He's a brutal, bloody, corrupt dictator who got what he deserved. But in terms of the precedents of what this means for international law and foreign policy, it could be troubling.
Let's bring in Dr. Christopher Sabatini. He's a senior fellow for Latin America at Chatham House and an expert on Venezuela. Good afternoon, Dr. Sabatini.
Good afternoon, Carol. How are you?
Well, I'm very well delighted to have you with us. Clearly, we are waiting for President Trump to tell us more about this operation. But already it's clear that, this was a really dramatic intervention into that Latin American country. What do you make of what President Trump and his military have carried out here?
Well, it is dramatic, and it could have been foretold as this basically escalation ramped up in the last 6 months. It was clear that Trump was trying to rattle the military, trying to force some regime change without actually having to commit troops on the ground. It was tried to do this also through the blowing up of the alleged narco boats off the coast of Venezuela. When that didn't work, it was clear that the next step in this escalation ladder had to occur. It was a matter of when and how far. But I think the dramatic part of this is the smash and grab operation against former President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. I don't think many people thought that was going to happen. I would dare venture that that only occurred because of some insider support within the regime, because seems like it was done a relatively clear operation. Donald Trump has said there have been some injuries on the part of the U.S., but that they could penetrate the inner security of Nicolas Maduro's, if you will, bunker and his wife and get them out, extract them with minimal injuries, indicates that there was some inside job within that. We'll see what happens now. The real question is what is happening in terms of the negotiations, both among the remnants of the Nicolas Maduro government, because this only decapitated, it's not regime change, and in those negotiations between them and the international community. Though that we'll have to see, but for the next couple hours, days even, this is really about what is left behind in Venezuela, both in terms of the democratic opposition and those former, if you will, cabinet members or inner circle members of the Nicolas Maduro government and where they're planning going and how they're going to, in some cases, either take the reins of power or save their own necks.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you suspect that there may have been some kind of help or intelligence provided on the ground. We heard President Trump saying there that it was only the United States that could carry out such an operation. But to actually send the forces in and to abduct the president and his wife, we don't know the full details of the military operation, and we may hear more about that from the president. But it is an extraordinary operation for the U.S. to take. And there have been other attempts at regime change in Latin America, but this is perhaps the most dramatic.
Certainly, even in recent history, when we think about this, when have been the past cases when the U.S. has swooped in and removed a person? And in this case, 1989, 1990, actually, the arrest of Manuel Noriega in Panama occurred exactly 35 years ago, rather, in 1990. So, we're seeing a real repeat of history. But in this particular case, it's different because the regime has remained in power. The government basically clearly sold out a member of the president, but it took a special operations force to surgically remove Nicolas Maduro. This wasn't a U.S. invasion as there was in Panama, nor is this the case of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, Pakistan, when he was killed by special ops forces hiding in incognito in Pakistan. That was a case of a terrorist who had basically killed thousands of Americans and was planning further attacks. He was on the run. He was not a head of state. But that even in that case, the U.S. had to do a lot of apologizing to Pakistan for invading its national territory. In this case, this is unprecedented. And quite frankly, it sets a very dangerous precedent. The U.S. is claiming right now that it had indicted Nicolas Maduro for narcotics trafficking. But this leaves open to other countries around the world. If they indict a head of state, does that then give them the international legal authority to go in and remove that head of state? And we simply don't know how this will play out. We don't know how Donald Trump will defend it. But if you're China, if you're Russia, this seems to give carte blanche to do whatever you like if you can indict a leader at your will and then make the case for why he or she should be removed. That's not to say that Nicolas Maduro is innocent by any stretch. He's a brutal, bloody, corrupt dictator who got what he deserved. But in terms of the precedents of what this means for international law and foreign policy, it could be troubling.
You mentioned Maduro himself. As you say, he was corrupt. He is widely believed to have stolen the last election, where he essentially rigged the entire election and refused to leave power. He's wrecked the economy of his country. You've had literally millions of Venezuelans leaving the country. Do you get any sense as to how the people of Venezuela and the rest of the political establishment are likely to react?
Well, first of all, as you say, Carol, last year, Nicolas Maduro lost the elections by all accounts, including by independent statisticians who basically evaluated the actas, the ballots that were counted and collected by the opposition, by civil society groups, and by independent international election observers. He stole the election. And he lost it by about 70% of the opposition candidate, presidential candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, to about 30%, a little over 30% for Nicolas Maduro. So he lost by a wide margin. So clearly, Maduro was not a popular figure within Venezuela. The question is, were Venezuelans, A, willing to endorse a U.S. military action to remove him from power? That does not seem likely. According to surveys that were conducted just recently, about 60% of the Venezuelans in exile supported military action in Venezuela, but only about 30% of Venezuelans inside Venezuela supported that. Now, of course, conducting surveys in a closed regime, autocratic regime such as Nicolas Maduro's at the time, are somewhat dubious, but it does indicate a certain amount of trepidation on the part of Venezuelans for the U.S. action, what could happen in terms of collateral damage, and what it could provoke over the long term. And it's that last question we really don't know. And the Venezuelans that I've been talking to, with the exception of the Venezuelan opposition in exile, are deeply worried about what comes next and about their own security, because all we've seen happen right now is simply the decapitation of a regime. The instruments of repression, the mechanisms of corruption and illicit activity that Maduro was allegedly in charge of, or at least oversaw, are still in place. How those get removed and you move to a much more transparent, accountable democratic government, even saying the one that was legitimately elected last year, is a long, long road ahead. And we don't know how or if the Trump administration has any game plan to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a statement from Maria Corina Machado, who is Venezuela's opposition leader. I mean, she left the country. She's, of course, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And she says that Maduro faces international justice. She adds that her opposition colleague, Edmundo Gonzalez, who is widely believed to have actually won the 2024 presidential election, should now assume the presidency. But, I mean, how likely do you think it is that those opposition leaders will be able to perhaps return to Venezuela and take up the reins of power?
It's exactly the fundamental question. And the truth is, if you look at the civilian side of the Nicolas Maduro regime that remains, that's Delcy Rodriguez and her brother Jorge Rodriguez, or on the military side, you mentioned Vladimir Pedrino Lopez and Diosdado Cabello, neither of those sides want to see the opposition come to power. Maria Corina Machado has rightly said that they are taking names and numbers, and they expect there to be justice for those who committed human rights abuses, engaged in gross acts of corruption. She said that not everyone in the Maduro government will go to prison, but certainly those high-level leaders will. So they're out now, right now, trying to save their necks. Full embrace of an opposition government of the sort that Maria Corina Machado is now talking about is unlikely from those same sectors, quite frankly, because they're looking at jail time potentially, or even worse. So she's not going to be open with welcome arms, nor will Edmundo Gonzalez, despite the fact they definitely have the support of the majority of public opinion in Venezuela. And the problem now in the letter that you just cited, Carol, is, first of all, I think Maria Corina is correct in calling Venezuelans to the streets. I think popular pressure is very important at this point, although it's very risky. This regime has shown no compunction whatsoever about arresting and even killing peaceful protesters. But the other problem that she's arguing, though, is for a shadow government, for Edmundo Gonzalez to be declared the legitimate president of Venezuela. And that's problematic. We already saw this happen in 2019 when the opposition attempted to name a Democratic interim president, who was then the president of the National Assembly, as the sort of interim government. That failed after 2 years. That occurred under Donald Trump. And quite frankly, that deeply split the country and hamstrung the international community in terms of what it could do. So I don't think the opposition could or should go down that path immediately, because it would create a headache if there's now two competing governments. It could deeply polarize Venezuela and deeply polarize the international community.